Chris?
Yeah, I'm just waiting for...
Chair, can I just say that Graham Writer has joined the meeting, but he doesn't have a video on. So if Graham needs to speak or make himself known, he will need to unmute his microphone to do it, because I have a feeling that the camera may not be on.
I'll just turn it off as requested. Is that okay?
All right, that's great. Thanks, Graham. Sorry, my apologies.
Okay, let's start the meeting. Welcome to our facts to Thursday, the 16th of July, 10:30. Kay is talking us through. Do we have any apologies of absence?
Yes, Chair, we have apologies from A. Hodgson and P. Record.
P. Record. At this point, do we want to do the roll call of members?
Yes, I'll go through each councillor. If you could just confirm you're here. Councillor Campbell.
Yes, I'm here.
Councillor Sessford.
Present.
Councillor Dickinson.
Here.
Councillor Dunn.
Present.
Councillor Lang.
Present.
Chair, Councillor Renner Thompson.
Present.
Councillor Stewart.
Present.
Councillor Stowe.
Present.
Councillor Swinburne.
Present.
Councillor Wallace.
Present.
Church Representative Reverend D. Lennox.
You're on your mute, David.
I can see he's here. Teacher Union Representatives J. Parkin.
I'm off mute now, is that right? Okay, I'm here, Dave.
J. Parkin and S. Payne. No. J. Sanderson. No.
Hi, it's Dean Jackson. Union Rep S. Payne has now retired completely. So, okay.
Thank you. And Councillor Wayne Daly, Cabinet Member.
Present.
That's everyone, Chair.
Thank you, members. Item 3, do we have any disclosures of interests? No. Right.
Sorry. I do. A member of my family received a grant from the council during the lockdown, and it was for businesses. So there's part of the agenda which, when it comes to that, I'm not sure if it's relevant or not. Thank you,
Deirdre. We had an email from Liam Henry addressing that, saying that it was an interest, but not one enough to impact on the agenda.
Okay, thank you.
And Trevor?
Yeah, I'm just going to say the same. I'm the treasurer of a club that received a grant, so just to let that know, it's not going to affect anything.
Thank you. Okay, so before we move on, this is Dean Jackson's last. He is retiring in August, I believe, and he's been a fantastic help to the Facts Committee over the last year or two that he's been here, and I'm sure we'll wish him all the best. But I think I'm sure Wayne will say something later on in the meeting, but just so that can be noted.
Thank you, Guy.
No worries. Trevor's clapping there, but he's still on mute, so you can't hear him. And to add to another litany of issues, the agenda has changed slightly. So we're going straight to item 5 first, reports of the Executive Director of Adult Social Care and Children's Services. We'll get through that, and then we'll loop back to the reports of the Chief Executive, and the Chief Executive will be joining us at that point. So I will pass over to Kath McAvoy-Carr.
Thanks, Chair. This is a report about the performance in the last quarter of 1920. Members of the committee will be aware that this is a regular report that comes to FACS. It is slightly delayed because of the pandemic, but the report relates to information around the outturn of performance for 1920. And I'll hand over to Alan to provide you some of the detail in relation to that.
Thank you, Kath. Good morning, everyone. Yes, as Kath says, the report was due to come to the May meeting, and it contains the updates up to the end of March. Within the Directorate, there has been weekly monitoring, obviously around the COVID-19 situation, and data is available around that in terms of demand levels. The report is in the usual format that members will be familiar with, and Section 5 provides an overview in terms of the direction of travel with regards to performance, and that's supplemented by the detail which is in the appendices. Appendix A deals with the indicators pertaining to education and skills, and Appendix B refers to children's social care. The comments provided by senior managers and the relevant actions where required are within those appendices as well. And the finance section provides an update, and that's available in Section 6. I know that there is interest from members working group previously around exclusions, and I do have figures on both permanent exclusions and fixed term exclusions, which I can provide an up-to-date picture on, if that would be helpful, Chair. And happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Alan. Right, I'm going to pass straight over to Councillor Swinburne, who's got his hand up, who chaired the exclusions subcommittee we had.
Thank you, Chair. And as has just been mentioned there, I'm really pleased because as part of the exclusions task and finish working group, one of the requests that came out of that was for more granular detail on the exclusions work and on the results. And throughout this report, it has been broken down into a lot of separate sort of individual categories on there. So it's great to see that something, you know, some of the work is coming out and found its way into that report. So as Alan's just said there, yes, can we have some of that information? Because what we can't compare as a result of some of this work is like for like. So previously we just had like a full total of the information for exclusions, and although we've asked for more granular detail, it's just trying to gauge where we now stand with regards to the exclusions work. So with breaking it down, we don't get that full total. So if we can have the information as to sort of where we stand on exclusions, you know, are we now improving on what's happened sort of like for like, year for year? Is there an improvement? Is it the same? If you've got that information, would really like to know on where we stand, please, Al.
Yep, certainly. And yes, we do have that information. In terms of the like for like picture, I'll start off with permanent exclusions. The details in Appendix A, but basically the headline figures are that if we compare the position at the end of March 20 compared to the position at the end of March 19, at the end of March 20 there had been 54 permanent exclusions in the current school year, and that compares to the end of March 19 position of 69. So that was an improvement of 15. If we roll that forward to the current position, we can see that in the current school year there had been 55 permanent exclusions, and that compares to the previous school year position of 89. So yes, there's an improvement there. Would you like me to provide the figures for the fixed term exclusions as well?
Yes, please. Yeah.
Okay, I will do. The figures for the current school year for fixed term exclusions are 1569, and I've got the gender breakdown for that, if that's helpful. And the figure for fixed term exclusions for the previous school year was 3441. So significant difference.
Yeah, and I know that, you know, you might think that COVID will have some effect on that, and no doubt it will. But the last quarter, as it were, the last term historically is a term when there's significantly less exclusions that take place. So I think just going off those results, and especially on the fixed term ones, there's been a massive improvement, and that's in no way paramount to the massive amount of work that's taken place. And I'm not just going to say from the Exclusions Task and Finish group. That's not it. It's from everyone involved, from the officers, from everyone that works in the schools. This is a huge improvement on those figures, and it's because of everyone involved and the focus that's been put on that and the huge efforts that's been put. So well done to everybody involved in this. We're seeing some real improvements on this. I think it's great to see these results, and thank you to everyone involved as well.
Thank you, Mark. I'm looking at my screen. Would anyone, Councillor Daly?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for allowing me to come in. And as has been indicated there, there's some very clear indications of how we're performing. But I just did want to pick up on one particular element, and obviously echo what Councillor Swinburne said there around the exclusion performance. But last week in the press, there was some reporting of what looked like the position in Northumberland about the number of children who get the school of their choice. And the impression given in the reporting, and it obviously was a national story which had been lopped into Northumberland and gave the impression it was Northumberland. So I just want to draw members' attention to Appendix A, Section 2. So it's number 2 on the list. And it's about the percentage of pupils getting their first choice of primary school. Northumberland is absolutely bucking the trend of national performance. So our target is to get 98% of our children getting the first choice school. Our actual performance is 98.2. But if you read the narrative, this is a 1% improvement on last year, which is good. We're going in the right direction. But more importantly, we're 7% above the national average for children being able to get the school of their choice. Parental choice in Northumberland, statistically, you are 98.2% assured of getting the school that you want to go to. Elsewhere in the country, much lower. So I just really wanted to put on record that the stuff which was carried in some papers last week was a national story which was supplanted into Northumberland to give the impression it was Northumberland. It's not. Northumberland is outperforming the rest of the country and is actually increasing our performance. So the message very clearly to parents is, if you come to live in Northumberland and you have children who are about to join the school system, you are 98.2% likely to get the school of your choice. So I just think it's a really important message to send out there to the public, that this is a really positive message, and it shows that our performance year on year is improving. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Wayne. Councillor Campbell.
Thank you, Wayne. Yes, I read that in the Chronicle, and it was quite disappointing, because I know what we've been told from you and officers over the past year, and I've heard from teachers and parents, how schools are improving and how they have improved. So it was disappointing to read that. I'm not quite sure why that report was written in the ways in which it was, because, like you say, anybody from outside the area, and I spoke to a couple who were thinking of coming from Wales, they had read it, and they said that was the one thing that would put them off from coming here to live, which, it's really shocking. I think maybe, Wayne, I'm not telling you how to do things, far be it from me to do that. You're much more capable than me, but maybe a letter to the press or something to outline the facts rather than the fiction as to what they printed. Thank you.
Yeah, just to come back onto that, Councillor Campbell, we did. Our comms team did speak to the paper who had published that, and they confirmed that it was a national press release that they had taken, and were using it as just using Northumberland as the example because it was within Northumberland. So we have asked that in future, if there are any cases that they come to us first, that we can give them the facts and figures for Northumberland.
It's just that I know Wayne's so dedicated to education, and I think kind of a bit of a slap in the face for Wayne, which is not acceptable when he dedicates so much of his time to education. You've got to give credit where it's due.
Thank you, Deirdre. I'll take you out for a drink after lockdown.
The pubs are open now. Okay. Would anyone else like to comment on the current performance report? Dave Lennox. Oh, sorry. We'll go to Dave, and then Dean. Do you want to come in after that?
No problem. Thank you.
Am I right in thinking, compared to previous years, the proportion of green is down? Looking at the trend lines, some of them look good, some of them are very erratic. Are we performing really in the best possible way at the present time overall?
Alan, do you want to come in on that?
Yes, I can do. In terms of the trend lines, that's information that does come directly off the council's performance system into the report. And as indicated on the report, they don't give a totally accurate reflection of direction of travel, because they struggle with new indicators that we put into the system. So it's not entirely a like-for-like position compared to the previous year.
The other issue is that, the other issue as well, Chair, is that we set quite significant challenges in terms of our data targets. So we don't just set easy targets for ourselves. We set more challenging targets each year in order to be able to keep pushing ourselves to progress, to make the progression.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good.
So this would account for the seemingly greater proportion of red and amber, because you're pushing yourselves, is that right?
Sorry, I keep having to unclick. Yes, it would. For some of it, well, yes, some of it there has been a change in the trends and a change in the outturns. But actually, for a lot of it, is we push ourselves on a regular basis to make sure that we get we achieve greater targets, or try to achieve greater targets.
Alan, you had your hand up there.
Yes, thank you. I think probably another dimension as well is that where possible, where we've got national benchmarks for these performance indicators, we've tried to include the national average within the narrative, and it's certainly the case for some indicators. The one that Councillor Daly referred to before about first choice of primary schools is a good example. That is one where we did set ourselves very challenging targets. And you can see that I think we were around 7% better than the national average, but because of the target that we set ourselves being very challenging, we came out as amber, not green, because we compare ourselves with the target that we set. But compared to the national average, we would be green significantly better.
Very good. And Dean Jackson.
Yeah, it was only a quick point, Chair, really, and I think it's pertinent to all the points that have just been made. Number one, it's not exactly about number of people parents getting to school of their choice, but I've just had a quick look in terms of 3 and 4 year olds in the county, i.e., that cohort of children getting free education in Northumberland. It's confirmed on the DFE that it's the second highest in the country. So I think, and it's actually running at 110%. So actually, all of our youngsters are getting free education, and 10% are probably jumping over the border from Newcastle to take up our free education as well, free education offer. So it's a really positive picture. The second point for Mr. Lennox, I think, really what we have seen over the last few years is a move towards comparing ourselves, as Alan has just said, to national averages. What I found in my travels around the Northeast is we're a little bit hung up on comparing ourselves to the Northeast average. You know, we're top of the Northeast League table. And I think actually we have to we've started being far more ambitious and comparing ourselves to the whole country, because that's where we're really going to be judged. And when you hear figures like second best in the country, that's when you know you're making the progress that needs to be made in this county.
Thank you, Dean. Yeah, that's a very good point. It's better to compare yourself across the whole of England rather than just in the restrict yourself to the northeast. Okay, so do we have any further comments on this report? Liz Dunn, Councillor Liz Dunn.
Thank you, Chair. Just page 8 of the appendices, the rate of looked after children. Do we have any reasoning behind that, why it's at an all-time high? And I'm just aware that it sort of relates to the financial impact, you know, the budget bit at the beginning as well.
Yes, Councillor Dunn, again, it's another one of those issues where, in actual fact, in comparison to the region, we are actually either in the top one or the second top in relation to the lowest numbers of children per 10,000 population. That doesn't mean that we're complacent about that, but we have seen a rise in our numbers of looked after children. And we know that that is a national issue. So we know that there are there's a continuing trend for more children coming into our care. And you are right, that does impact on the finances in relation to that. We are regularly challenging ourselves. We have gateway panels that look at the rationale and the reasons for children becoming looked after. We scrutinise those decisions. We do regular audits to make sure that that children are coming into care when they should and not being brought into care inappropriately. Our court proceedings also scrutinise that work and determine whether or not the criteria met for children to become looked after. And we are confident that our decision making is appropriate. We are looking, of course, earlier down the line to see what support services we can provide to children at an earlier stage to prevent them needing potentially to come into our care at a later stage.
Thank you, Kath. I recognise that these figures go up to the end of March. What sort of impact do you think the COVID-19's had on these, if any?
Yeah, so we have seen an increase in the numbers of children who are looked after, as have the vast majority of the region, to be fair, and a high portion of the country have. We have seen an increase. Part of that is not due to any more children coming into our care, but because actually we've not been able to conclude children's situations in order for them to move on from our care. So we have been encouraged to maintain children who would be care leavers in our care and not move them on into other accommodation. Courts have not been sitting in the same way, so the proceedings have not been concluding in the same way. So what we know is that children aren't coming in at any greater a rate, they are just not leaving our care at the same rate as they would normally do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kath. That's a good point, well made. Okay, before we move on, I can't see anyone else indicating to speak. So we're happy to note the report because that's all it is. It's a report to note. And we'll take on those comments from Councillor Swinburne at the start for more information on the exclusions and so on. So we'll move on to item 5.2, Missing Slavery, Exploitation and Trafficking Report, MSET, which is Appendix D in your pack. And who's going to...
So I'll just introduce this. As members will probably be aware, this is part of an annual reporting for Scrutiny in relation to activity around our people who are at risk of going missing, being sexually exploited or being criminally exploited. Again, as members will also know, there's a report on a later agenda item which relates to our joint targeted area inspection, which was inspected us in this particular area. So this is the annual report which Sharon Pearson will talk through in relation to the activity and the work that we undertake in this area. So I will hand over to Sharon, who was on the call,
You were there, Sharon?
Sharon, are you there? Oh, yes.
Sharon, you need to unmute the setting on the screen. Thank you.
Hi, sorry about that. we're here to present the MSET report. I'm Sharon Pearson. I'm with my colleague from the police, who is?
I'm Sharon Brennan. I'm a sergeant with Northumberland Police.
So we've given you the report, so everybody will have the opportunity to read that. And what we're going to do is we're just going to go through the salient points within that report. If anybody has any questions at the end, if you'd like to let us know, and we'll try our best to answer them for you. But hopefully we'll be able to give you the information within the report that you need. Thank you.
Okay. So the MSET panel is responsible for coordinating and ensuring the effectiveness of our multi-agency arrangements around safeguarding and promoting the welfare of children and young people. MSET itself, if you look at the letters involved there, it's around young people who go missing, it's around young people who are subject to modern-day slavery, youngsters at risk of criminal and sexual exploitation, as well as trafficking, which is youngsters that are taken from one place or another for the purpose of exploitation. The MSET group itself, it's not about care planning, because Northumberland already have robust and effective child protection processes in place. MSET's about added value to those plans so that we can reduce the risk to young people and children, but it also gives oversight of patterns and trends which are occurring within the area. MSET's been in place in Northumberland in its current format since March 2019. It's chaired by myself from Northumberland Police and co-chaired by Sharon, Senior Management within Children's Social Care. And the purpose of today is to report on the progress that's been made since a paper was last at Cabinet, which was in January 2020. At that time, the MSETs were on a monthly basis. The agenda was quite lengthy. There was normally a minimum of approximately 8 young people on the agenda, and it was quite difficult to effectively add value to that many young people in the purpose of one meeting. MSET itself has been subject to scrutiny since March 2019, when there was a joint targeted area inspection, also an Ofsted inspection, and also the Safeguard and Strategic Partnership Business Manager has been running a formal review of the MSET process at the same time.
As Sharon has just said, there was the MSET. We further developed our MSET processes by the recommendations of JTI, ILAC, and the MSET review that we received. As a result of that, we developed an action log to keep us on task around progress that we needed to make, and the action log is overseen by the Exploitation Subcommittee. And that began in November 2019, and significant progress has been made within that to date.
Okay. Prior to the MSET itself, 1 week beforehand, we hold an MSET pre-meet. It's attended by both myself and Sharon Pearson, the chair and the co-chair of MSET. We have the Police Missing from Home coordinator, Northumberland's exploitation lead, and education performance are represented at that meeting. The purpose of this meeting is to consider all of the MSET risk assessments and the plans that come into the group. We've moved our focus to enhancing the plans that we've actually received into that meeting, with a view to managing each identified risk and addressing support needs before they escalate and before we get into crisis situation. All of the cases that we hear at MSET benefit from that multi-agency attendance. In cases where we've got a care plan, it's come into the pre-meet, we've added as much to that plan as we possibly can, we've exhausted all options, and yet the risk to these children and young people is still significantly high, we would then move that case into the full MSET panel itself. What we found is by strengthening our focus on preventative risk assessment at the pre-meets, is that we've had a significant reduction in young people that have needed to proceed into the MSET itself. And what we found is within the last calendar year, whilst we held those 13 pre-meets once every 4 weeks, we only actually proceeded to 8 full MSET meetings. So the MSET itself, it's a full meeting held on a monthly basis where there's a need for it to go ahead. I've talked about the ones that have already been stood down, and I think that evidences the success of the pre-meet and the newly implemented procedures that we have. What we're doing is we're focusing on prevention, we're also focusing on contextual risk.
And to firm up our recommendations following MSETs for young people and to reduce risk of exploitation for them, as part of the action plan, we've firmed up the representation on the MSET panel. And you can see there's a list there of people who we have on the panel. Some new members are our fire and rescue now attend. We've got our colleagues from community safety, and we always have relevant adult representation. Members of the care team of each individual young person are also present at MSET to present the reports that they have to give more contextual information around those young people. That's pretty much it.
Okay. What we do is we carry out a mapping exercise before the MSET itself, and that mapping exercise pulls together all of the information which is currently held in silos. So we've got information which sits with the police, information sitting within social care, within other agencies, and also within our return interviews regarding our young people that go missing and are at risk of exploitation whilst we're away. So that exercise pulls all the information together. It's a visual representation of the young people and the risks that surround them. And it really allows the MSET members to focus on the risk, which not only the child, the family, but also environment and those wider risks. The document is really effective for me as a chair to look at that, and I might have a location or a particular person that's at risk to that child, and I can focus the panel's efforts in reducing risk around these particular individuals or particular locations. Once we've done the contextual safeguarding, there'll be a number of actions that will come out of that MSET, and a lot of it is around proactive disruption. So if I think of a recent example, we identify a number of addresses that young people are attending whilst they're missing. We might have persons at that address who are harbouring these youngsters. If we're able to evidence that, then obviously the police can take some kind of proactive disruption activity. What we've also done is we've secured resources from both children's care and from housing on occasions to go out and to target particular areas or to target particular persons and to give them some advice around what offences they could be committing, but also some education work, because on a lot of occasions they don't realise that what they're doing actually is wrong. So alongside the disruption activity, from a policing side, we appointed a single point of contact for all our youngsters that are subject of MSET or who are at risk of exploitation. This single point of contact is a neighbourhood officer, and that neighbourhood officer obviously has opportunities to engage with the young person, the family in the areas around that risk, but links in very closely with the social worker or with any professional that's got oversight of a plan around that young person. We also add an MSET flag to the policing systems, and I know my colleagues in health and education do likewise, and that's to alert their colleagues to the risks that that child is exposed to.
And overall within that, we have an exploitation lead within Northumberland County Council, and her role predominantly sat in our MASH previous to recently, where she's now placed within Northumberland Adolescent Service, where I oversee that role. The reasoning behind that was to entrench an understanding for all of our frontline practitioners to make sure that on a daily basis that we had guidance and support with those young people in particular, and that we could alert ourselves and understand more about criminally and sexually exploited young people. This exploitation practitioner, she supports the formulation of the disruption plans with a view of enhancing the quality and effectiveness of the plans that each young person may have. We also have the team managers within social care, part of the review of the MSET documentation. We consider the needs for strategy meetings prior to MSET to ensure that we reduce risks as effectively and as quickly as we possibly can for those exploited young people. We have managers supporting social workers to formulate the disruption plans alongside the existing care plan, and so that we can manage risk at the earliest opportunity. The exploitation practitioner also supports the process and attends regular strategy meetings, and more recently has begun to do direct supervision with social workers and support workers who may be carrying caseload of young people who experience exploitation too.
MSET itself across the region is currently subject of review. It's a review which has been coordinated by Robin Harper-Coulson from Northumberland Safeguarding Partnership. The purpose of that review, the 6 local authorities across the region that within the Northumberland Police Force area, the aim is to ensure consistency. So if we have a young person who is a Sunderland child that moves to Northumberland, for example, we have the same processes in place, and the child will get the same focus, the same attention. We've had a look at the data from June 19 through to June 20, and what we found now that we've moved to our new process is that we have 65 young people who've actually been discussed at the MSET pre-meet. Almost a 50-50 split between the cohort between male and female, with a slightly more males, and the average age of young people that we've discussed at the pre-meet has been just over 15-year-olds. I think it's worth noting that out of those 65 discussed, 45 of these young people have not had a repeat referral into MSET, and I think that's evidence that the risk management plans that are devised both within the child protection processes but added to at the pre-meet are effective and robust. The main risk factors that we're seeing for young people who are referred into the MSET process are around criminal and sexual exploitation. We have increased our worrying incidents around their missing episodes, mental health issues, substance abuse, and issues around breakdowns of their within the family or the peer relationships. We've also improved our data capture around elements of missing, exploitation and trafficking, and that helps us to better understand our local issues and make decisions around the allocation of resources, for example, to structure an activity from all partners and obviously training across the board as well. We also undertake a data exercise. The aim of that is to identify the next wave of vulnerable young people around their missing and exploitation. And I know that we will be doing a file audit to consider the need for referrals into specialist providers.
So with regards to our missing from home arrangements for independent return home interviews for our young people, we recognise that missing episodes is a strong indicator of exploitation. When our young people go missing and first return, we want to provide them with an arena for them to be able to give us information about their experience and what might have happened with them whilst they've been away from home. We also support them we also provide support with a review of reducing the risk of further episodes of them going missing. We've included an induction into our new daily tracking process, and that is so we have timely responses and that we're tenacious in making sure that our young people are seen and that their family members, if they're not looked after children, are also seen. And we like to see what the push and pull factors are there. Are they running away from home from something within the home, or are they running to something outside of the home? I also receive daily updates on each individual missing young person, and I'm also able to observe the recordings of what steps have been taken to try and contact families to return young people home, and all of the feedback in and around those issues. We're continuously trying to improve our return home interview formats to make sure that our young people are safeguarded. Our links to the Violent Reduction Unit, late last year we were successful in a bid with the Police Crime Commissioner, and that was for the purpose of preventing the next wave of young people likely to be exploited. The exploitation practitioner worked with the performance team to identify 15 indicators that would make a child vulnerable to exploitation. 119 children were identified, and out of those children, the areas, there were 52 in the Blythe and Cramlington area, 21 in the Bedlington and Morpeth localities, 18 in and around Ashington locality, 14 living in the north of the county, and 9 in the west. There was 6 group work sessions run with those young people where these discussions and interventions took place, and of those young people, that were identified. The young people presented their learning in a final session, and they did that in the form of rap, arts and spoken presentations. All of those young people that attended and said that they had an increased understanding of online safety, health and relationships, and social relationships. So there was like a really positive outcome from that piece of work. The VIU jointly with the Get Connected also has undertaken a locality review as part of the National Serious Crime Strategy. With regard to that was put on hold due to COVID, so there's not like a significant outcome that I can share with you today about that information, but we would be able to give you an update going forward. The Youth Justice Service have also received funding to focus the reduction of criminalisation of young people, children and young people, and that's based around the developments of the out-of-court disposal panel. To date, in June, 7 panels have been held, 37 young people have been presented, and they've been 37 young people have been discussed. 19 have been offered a lower level intervention, which reduced their risk of being criminalised. The reduction of criminalisation for our looked after children. We worked with looked after children and care leavers, and considered that in relation to those young people, that they would be discussed at MSET if we had concerns with regards to unpicking the reasons why they might be being brought to the attention of the police. We monitored these this is all monitored through the Corporate Parent Advisory Group, Multi-Agency Looked After Partnership, and the Youth Justice Management Board. With regards to the missing young people, NAS commissioned an accredited level 3 training course where there was a pass or fail rate, and that was to ensure that we had a robust group of people within Northumberland Adolescent Service being able to carry out those return home interviews. And during that course, we had 19 participants across the support work tier, and 100% of them attended and completed and passed. The Northumberland County Council Missing Coordinator now provides virtual briefings to the police missing from home coordinators, and there's also a mock-up accreditation training session that we're going to be putting together, and we will also be training the police missing coordinators within that cohort. The PACE accredited award in child sexual exploitation training has been completed by the exploitation practitioner. The learning will be disseminated via various training programs, and that is usually the missing coordinator is a big part of that role. Between April and June 2020, the following training has been offered, and you can see there's quite an exhaustive list, and this was to highlight exploitation of all levels, to practitioners, to voluntary sectors, to foster carers, to residential workers also. And as you can see, we've had training days undertaken to statutory and voluntary colleagues on criminal exploitation, sexual exploitation. We've had 519 professionals that access the e-learning for criminal exploitation, so that's been completed by a large member of our practical workforce group. 233 professionals that access the sexual exploitation e-learning. And we've had classes around the county lines courses and that have been delivered by the Edge Consultancy, which is quite specialist in that area. The county lines presentations have been delivered by Northumbria Police, and there's been 2 carousel events which were really well attended also. Sexual exploitation, sexual and criminal exploitation sessions have also been delivered to our ASYE Academy, so our new workforce of social workers coming through have also beginning their career and outlook on factoring in exploitation at the very earliest stage.
I think, as you can appreciate, COVID-19 and the lockdown that has been introduced in March has had a significant impact on our working practices. What we wanted to point out is that our commitment to vulnerable young people in our communities still continues despite that lockdown. The MSET processes still go ahead, although they go ahead via virtual meetings. What we found is that national figures tell us that young people's screen time has gone up by a massive 200%. And for most young people, the need for stimulation and validation is largely met through their peers and through social interaction, which clearly is not being fulfilled because of that lockdown. And because they've had that increase in screen time, there is an increased risk of online exploitation. What we've found is there's been a notable increase in children's social care intervention as a result of online exploitation. And we initially experienced a reduction in our looked after children who were missing when lockdown was first imposed, a significant reduction, to be fair. But this also coincided with an increase in missing reports for young people who weren't necessarily known to children's services or known to the police, and this was largely due to parents reporting breaches of the COVID restrictions, not about their concerns regarding their child's physical safety. What I will say is that in recent weeks, the numbers of missing episodes that have been reported into police and into social care has gone back to more or less pre-COVID levels. There has been an increase in referral and assessments around criminal exploitation, but it's unclear as to whether this is a direct impact of COVID or whether in fact it's a result of wider work with professionals to increase their understanding and identification of criminal exploitation.
And that's the end of our overview for yourselves. Does anybody have any questions?
Thank you very much, Sharon. That was a very comprehensive report to go with our very comprehensive report that we had in our packs. Councillor Sesford, briefly, if you will.
Well, I'll try and be brief, Chair. Thank you very much. I mean, following, as you already said, quite a comprehensive report there. I feel almost as though it was a long time ago to the point I wanted to make, which was back in 3.4, which was about the harbouring of missing people. It doesn't see, it sort of tells you the situation, but it doesn't really, to me, sort of explain what the disruption in the education of homeowners actually is. I mean, there's people who've gone missing, they've been harboured in an address. Harbouring, I would need a little bit more explanation on that, because my idea of harbouring might not be the same as everybody else sitting around this virtual table. Harbouring to me seems a bit more scary than it possibly is. So a little bit more background on that, please, and a little bit more background on how we actually educate homeowners to the repercussions of harbouring. I mean, is education, are we taking legal action? Are we just advising them of what they're doing wrong? It's good, but it doesn't explain everything to me.
Right. I can answer from a practical perspective what a disruption program looked like, and that is where we get intelligence and concerns that young people are frequenting a particular area or particular addresses, and we collect that, what time are they going there, when they're missing, snippets of information young people might tell us, and the intelligence is brought together. What happens is community safety, the police and social care all decide on what level we need to approach that household. And the most successful approach of late was when we went to the household three-armed, so you had community safety, police and social care together to disrupt what might be happening in that household. And each of those professionals had a role to play. One might have been, is anything illegal happening in that household? The other might be our housing colleagues to say, this is a rented property that we rent to you and that you are using this not for the purposes of what we're renting to you for. And from a social care perspective to say, these are our children and we need to keep them safe, and you're providing an arena for them to come and visit. We want you to stop doing that. So on a practical level, that's what that disruption looked like. And the second half of your question, sorry, could you just repeat the second half of your question?
Well, to be honest, I can't even remember my first part, wasn't it? When we second. No. I'm basically on. You say the word disruption. You disrupt their activities. I mean, what are their activities? Are these adults with our missing children? Are they are they people who are with their similar age people, like they're hiding out, if you like, or in a friend's house? So basically, how are we educating? The second part was really on how are we educating the homeowners, but who are these homeowners? Are they friends? Are they adults? I would be a bit more wary for adults.
Generally, they're adults, and we're particularly concerned because it depends what type of intelligence is fed back to us. Substance misuse may be an issue in that household, and if our young people are attending those households, then we assume that they're being exploited and possibly at risk of substance misuse or anything else of that matter. I don't know if there's anything you can add to that.
I think it's important to note that on occasion, on occasion, it's quite often, our young people are going into addresses when they are missing from home, and the adults at that address don't actually realise that the child is missing from home. And it might well be that the child is at the address, the adult has a number of similar age children to our missing child, and they've gone round to see their friend and been allowed to have a sleepover. So it could be as quite innocent as that, or it could be more that actually there is drug-related activity, criminal activity going on at the address. And if that is the case, then the police can take enforcement action.
Well, I think that's the case I was on about, because I didn't catch that in the report. Police will take action if, unless they're convinced it's just sort of, going with a mace. If they suspect there's any sort of criminal activity on, action is taken, because I don't think that came out so much in the report. At least I didn't pick it up anyway.
And sorry about that, because I think what we were trying to do is say that the level of disruption, which regardless of what level, of the disruption, it's very successful and it's working.
Good. Okay, thank you.
Trevor. Deirdre, you've turned your mic off.
Sorry.
No, sorry. It's on. Sorry. Would you like to ask a question?
It's just a thank Sharon for that report. It's an in-depth report and very informative. I'm just wondering if there any of those properties are our, and they're our tenants in those properties, and they're harbouring young people. Is there any action at all that we take against them, or even if they're private tenants? Do we speak to the landlords? Because I know I get this in my patch sometimes, where people will say there's a lot of young people in that house and it doesn't look good as what's happening there. So I'm just wondering, because if there's any kind of criminal activity going on with young people, we should be taking action as an authority, certainly if it's our property, against the tenants. Thank you, Sharon, for that.
Yeah. Do you want me to respond to that?
Please, if you don't mind.
We gather intelligence on that household, and quite often a spot's put on that household. So we would have any intelligence feed through that one channel, that single point of contact. And depending on what information we receive, the first starts with a warning. So we begin to build that picture. Then it can develop through to a conviction of any kind. It can continue through to people having to leave that property. And yes, intelligence, depending on the nature, would be fed to the landlord. More importantly, it's usually when we go out with community safety, it's Northumberland Council who are renting them that property. So we almost have a fourth attendee, if you like. So, because if they're renting that property, they'll be saying you're at risk of losing your tenancy here. So we really need you to stop letting young people or children into your household. So does that answer your question? Sorry, your mic's off.
Okay, thank you. That's fine, Sharon. Thank you.
And David Lennox.
Sorry, your mic's off.
Page 5, paragraph 6. Nearly half of the children vulnerable to exploitation seem to be from the Blyth or Cromlington locality. It seems that Blyth and Cromlington are totally different areas. I would have liked to have seen, what proportion are from Blyth and what proportion are from Cromlington. To put those two areas together to give nearly half doesn't actually give a clear picture, I would have thought.
Yes, I think you're probably right, and we probably going to need to do a breakdown on that. But
Yeah, that's
I haven't got it in hand to give to you. I do apologise.
We don't have a breakdown between Blythe and Cromlington, do we not?
We will have a breakdown, but I haven't got it in this report.
Right.
Well, when we get the next report, because this is one that comes to us fairly regularly, if we could have a further breakdown of numbers, that would be.
I've made a note of that. That's fine.
That's great. Thank you, Sharon. Okay, members, we're here to note the reports and pick up areas for further scrutiny. We've found a few further areas for scrutiny. Are we happy to move forward? Thank you, and thank you very much, Sharon, for that, and Sharon for that presentation.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to item 5.3, which is the JTAI action plan, which is Appendix E in your pack. A very, very brief report, really, just for us to acknowledge. Kath McAvoy-Carr?
Yes, you'll be aware that following the joint targeted area inspection last year, we had to submit an action plan, and this is an update in relation to that action plan. I am going to ask Graham just to very briefly give some bullet points in relation to where we're at, and then happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, all. Yeah, this summarises the progress of the actions arising out of the the JTI, the Joint Target Area Inspection, from last summer. You clearly hear the key elements of the MSET presentation you've just heard is one of the key elements of our partnership responses to young people at risk of exploitation, and got a picture of the complexity and the partnership requirements for that. Overall, we've made the action plan is overseen by the Safeguarding Committee, which is a Safeguarding Children's Board, and actions are progressing as far as they can. There have been some slight delays through COVID, but even those, if you look at Appendix A, the actions relating in the red quadrant of the area have further progressed in terms of police intelligence, in terms of informing the strategy going forward. So I think hopefully members can be assured that the scrutiny of partnership oversight of those actions, and they are progressing where possible. And just further to that, the ILAC's inspection did look at areas of this and found very positive partnership working, and found that the identification and partnership responses to children at risk of exploitation were very strong and prompt in Northumberland. Again, happy to take any questions for that.
Thank you, Graham. Does anyone have any questions on the JTAI plan? No? Thank you very much. It's always a good sign. Shows that they understand it well. Thank you very much. Okay, so shall move on to item 5.4, Northumberland Inspection of Local Authority Children's Services, ILAC's Action Plan, which is Appendix F in your report. Again, Kath.
So this is just for, it was not just for information, it's to provide an overview of the action plan that we submitted to Ofsted following our inspection of local authority children's services, which took place in January, February of this year. We were required to submit an action plan by June. There was some opportunity for us not to submit that in view of COVID, but we made a decision that actually it should be business as usual, and it would be one less thing for us to think about post COVID. So we've submitted the action plan. This just details what those actions are based on the recommendations that Ofsted made, and we are subject to an annual conversation which will be taking place next in 2 weeks' time, and we will discuss that action plan with Ofsted on that occasion. Happy to take any questions if anybody has any.
Thank you, Kath. Any questions on the report? Again, it's one that we get fairly regularly. No? All right then, fantastic. Thank you very much, everyone. We shall now, if you turn back your agendas to item 4, the reports of the Chief Executive. The Chief Executive is now on the line with us, I believe. 4.1, which is Appendix A in your pack, COVID-19 Northumberland County Council response. And Daljeet, we'll go over to you.
Thank you, Chairman, and good to see you all. Hello, members. Really, I bring forward two reports to you, and I'll just take them together. It'll be myself to start, and then Councillor Daly will pick up some of the issues particularly relevant to some areas. So just given a bit of an overview of where we have been for the last few weeks in terms of our COVID response, I would just like to say that, as you can imagine, it's been quite a difficult time in some respects for not just our communities, but also our more vulnerable residents, and particularly our young people and our children and our families. I'll just take you through a bit of the corporate response to the COVID crisis, and then I'll just cover a little bit about the recovery response that we're currently undertaking. So the two reports are set out in that way. Firstly, I'd just like to cover the corporate emergency arrangements, and as you're aware, our emergency community plan was enacted. We have kept members as up to date as we possibly can through our Chief Exec's bulletin and our regular information. So our recap was enacted as detailed in the report alongside the business continuity plans that we'd been working on for some time. Obviously, they are refreshed annually anyway. So the detail from an operational perspective on the potential of pandemic or other major issues is always looked at. But as you'll know yourselves as individuals, I think this is a totally unprecedented event and set of circumstances, not just locally, but clearly nationally and internationally. So for us, this has been an opportunity to try to ensure that all of our arrangements have been looked at and reviewed in light of those business continuity plans. And we have learned a lot as an officer team and as a county to try to ensure that our communities have been protected. So we have, alongside our arrangements, had regular emergency committees. Those are obviously our emergency committee, which is enacted at short notice with the member representative of cross-party to ensure that advice is taken appropriately from members. In terms of the County Council executive response, we have enacted our gold arrangements, and they are a weekly clearly auditable set of actions from an executive team perspective. That is chaired by myself weekly, and into that reports our BIMPT, which is our Business Interruption Management Team, which is our silver command, and that has been chaired by Stephen Holmes, who is the Service Director for Adult Social Care. This has ensured that from a strategic and operational perspective, we have been able to ensure the relevant actions that have been necessary have been picked up and acted upon quickly and promptly. Obviously, in terms of advice and scrutiny committees, when I took the Cabinet report, the report through the Cabinet process, normally we would do pre-scrutiny, but it was felt that given some of the issues in this significant event, that post-scrutiny would be more effective in terms of members of the scrutiny committee hearing from myself and where necessary other members of the executive team, and then the specific scrutiny taking an overarching view. So I will cover issues out with of children and families, just so members have the opportunity given the circumstances, but also I will also home in just on some of the very specific issues around children, families issues. So in terms of our strategic arrangements, we as a council have linked into our local resilience forum. That forum is based on the footprint of Northumbria Police. So it is the 6 local authorities in that force area, but the forum is a much wider forum which deals with some of the wider issues such as health involvement through NHS England, and a whole range of other partners, including fire and rescue, civil contingencies, etc. And just a couple of examples of what that wider forum has looked at, things like excess death management processes and some of the more regional distribution arrangements for PPE, protective equipment. So in terms of the strategic oversight, that has then kept in place both an external and an internal view, but has also enabled us to link back to council members, whether that's through leaders' briefings or group briefings or via cabinet. And as you'll know, council was, I was given the delegation around council decisions, but clearly any decisions made or any delegated decisions I have made, I have shared those with group leaders to ensure that there is agreement or the opportunity for discussion. So in terms of our response, there have been 4 priorities really where we wanted to ensure that our overarching arrangements met the needs of the county and the very specific issues that needed to be raised. So those 4 areas have been really around a very rapidly changing situation. This has included the need to set up a community hub. That was set up very promptly. Maureen Taylor and her team did that. I'll come a little bit later on to a bit more detail about the hub. A further example of this priority was around our business hub arrangements. So I'll just cover that off in a little bit of detail too in a moment. But really our response through Northumberland Communities Together has really helped us to keep the very urgent issues around our shielded and more vulnerable communities. Our second priority really has been around, as you would expect, maintaining all essential services wherever possible and doing that with our residents in mind in a safe and effective way. Thirdly, clearly the health and safety and the well-being of our staff has been really important. So we have made quite a number of arrangements for our staff. You know, I have kept you updated through our member bulletin, but I'll cover off some of those. And then just as importantly now, looking at how we aid our county, you know, our great residents, our communities and our arrangements to look forward as the lockdown is easing and to ensure that things are operated in the safest way possible and with the residents in mind. You know, I have no issue. My view on this is very clear. Current guidance is still very clear about 2 metre social distancing wherever possible, working from home wherever possible, if that's possible, and also prompting and assisting our businesses and our great services to get back up and running through safe mechanisms. So as you can imagine, as the council balancing all of those things through recovery, it is a bit of a balancing act, but you know, one of the reasons to bring these reports to wider member scrutiny is that so we can receive immediate responses. You know, we don't take any sort of critical analysis in any way negatively. It's been quite a difficult time for us as a team, and trying every day to make sure you do the best for residents and staff has been a difficult thing. So we do realise, you know, that we don't always get everything right, but where we don't, we look to ensure that we put things in place quickly. But actually, the feedback generally has been overwhelmingly positive, and the communities particularly have been very appreciative. So because this is the Family and Children's Services Scrutiny, I will just cover off a couple of areas in relation to that, but I know Councillor Daly will have more to say on that, so I'll leave some of that to him. But personally, I just wanted to say, in terms of schools and the response from schools, you know, people come in, all of us come in for some criticism at times, but actually all of our schools, well, the vast majority of our schools have remained open. Our unions have been very supportive in linking up and working with us. Kath McAvoy has shown, you know, really positive leadership across schools and our children and families social care arrangements. Her and her team have gone out of their way to ensure, particularly our more vulnerable children and families, have had everything they needed to through these difficult times. So from a school's perspective, Councillor Daly will cover off some of that, but I just wanted to personally thank particularly trade unions, our great staff in schools and the leadership team. If I just move on to a little bit about children's services today, I just obviously only came into the call part way through your meeting, but clearly just through the reports I've heard today, it's very clear to me that the very important work that needs to happen has been ongoing. And I know Councillor Daly will probably cover off some of this, but, you know, our social work teams particularly, and our, you know, and by that, I don't mean just pure social workers, I mean like all of the associated care support teams and all of the other family support services have really just beavered away in the background, ensuring wherever possible families receive prompt responses. Personally, one of my concerns has been that through this lockdown period, our more vulnerable children and families will have been at risk, and the team in Children's Services have ensured and positively responded and ensured that we have put in all the mechanisms to keep people safe that we can. I'll just return to some of the more general information it held in the report very quickly before I hand on to Councillor Daly. So in terms of Community Hub and the arrangements, I have tried to keep you all updated, but as you'll see, very quickly the team stood up a Community Hub. We've had over 18,000 people, individual residents across Northumberland, identified as being on the shielded residence list from central government. And I was amazed myself to learn that at any one time we've worked with over 13,000 of those individuals, either as a council service or actually through the really excellent network that's been put in place. So communities working together has brought all of our great, I mean, we've got over 1,000 registered volunteers across Northumberland. We've got all of our brilliant VCS and community-based not-for-profit organisations, and actually everyday people in each of the localities. What's amazed me is that the local responses, although sometimes very different in each area, which is what we'd expect because we're not all the same, but actually the brilliant way communities have come together, whether that's through social media, through networks in their community, the formation of bubbles and working together. We, you know, have played a role in that through ensuring there's coordination, the availability of funding and support. And it hasn't, you know, in any way been about money, a lot of this. It's been about some of the background support, things like ensuring DBS checks are in place, or that there's clarity about needing to support people with packages of food, with medications, with a chat, because somebody, you know, after even 2 weeks, 2 days of being alone with nobody coming to see them, or being, you know, not being able to go to the shops, it's been very important to provide that holistic support. And the great team of staff and volunteers in our great communities have done that. In relation to some of the other services, obviously I've covered them in a lot of the other, the other 3 scrutiny meetings, but I'll just mention them. We've had great response in terms of local services. You'll have seen we've had staff out on the roads, in transport, assisting with town centre reopening, household waste arrangements, the whole grounds maintenance. You know, I regret every time because I miss people off, but right across the council's essential services, the teams have been great, and actually our communities have really appreciated that, so it's been great. In our corporate functions, I don't know what I would have done without Anne Bridges and the team on communication, the social media, getting the briefings sorted, making sure the public have had good information. You know, there have been times when we've made some decisions which haven't sometimes been the best decision. Good example is when we originally looked to close cemeteries for a while. Very quickly, we realised that wasn't the right decision, so we reopened them the next day. But, you know, there's no issue. We're happy to say when we think we've made an error and to put things right. So one of the things for me is from yourselves as members, if there are things where you feel we could have done a better job, you really need to, you know, I don't take that in any way as a negative. It just, this is a major learning situation. In terms of our IT support, you know, who would have thought that at Christmas that would all be on this meeting virtually and actually be talking and communicating in this way? They've got over 2,000 staff out working from home. So not only our frontline staff, but, you know, our planners, our highway development teams, capital teams, revenues and benefits, everybody, you know, doing their part for the council. I'll just move on a little bit to the business hub. I know a lot of members have been interested in this, and as you can imagine, with our range of medium to small businesses across the county, this has been a really significant issue for us. Obviously, we're very grateful to the government who gave us significant levels of funding, a pot of over £95 million for Northumberland. We have now dealt with over 7,650 business claims that have been put through. They have represented, you know, a significant number of our small to medium businesses. So over £86 million worth of funding out to them. And we're currently working on the discretionary elements where we were given an additional just under £5 million for other schemes. And I know a range of schemes, whether it was tourism, whether it's digital, whether it's any of our businesses really right across the county. I know people have really appreciated that. Obviously, like everything, there's been hiccups along the way, but the vast majority of those over 7,000 grants were out within days from their application, usually a couple of days of receiving the application. The money would be in the individual's bank account. And I know I've had a lot of correspondence from businesses particularly appreciating that support. We also have secured an additional £1.5 million from the North of Tyne Combined Authority, which will enable us to support recovery processes with businesses. So that's a really good opportunity too. In terms of the recovery report, I just want to say a couple of things really, because this is an ongoing and iterative piece of work. We need to ensure that as lockdown eases, we put our health and safety first. I see we've got Liz Morgan on now. I know she's been chairing, I think, the Health Protection Board. There is party to it. So I know some members have had queries about what are we doing about very key areas, you know, our care home response, a massive input from Stephen Holmes and the team on PPE and ensuring every care service across the county has had adequate supply, free into those homes, along with a range of other advice. And I just want to say I really appreciate all the leadership and support that both Kath McAvoy-Carr and Liz Morgan have shown in terms of particularly these areas, children, families, adults. You know, as a team, we don't know what we would have done without them to support these arrangements and ensure the good leadership and, you know, plethora of government guidance virtually daily. Sometimes, I mean, one week we counted there was 590 pages, all absolutely necessary, all required, but people have to, you know, a small group of officers interpret that and then give sound advice to members. So I just really appreciate all the efforts the team have put in. I really appreciate just, you know, the schools, everybody who's pulled together, all of our social work teams, our families and early year providers, everybody who's made the effort. And we will work together going forward. I just will say again, because I can't help myself, I really would welcome if people could just be very careful in terms of easing of the lockdown, take sensible precautions. Probably now's the time where we're at the most risk, because it's easy to start to feel we're coming out of things and, you know, we can go about our business and do things. We absolutely need to go about our business. It's important that people have a proper life and can fulfill that. But it's also important that we take care of each other and don't put people at risk, particularly our, you know, more vulnerable people, shielded people in our families. So thank you, and I'll hand on to Councillor Daly if that's okay.
Thank you, Daljit. And again,
I'll come to you after Deirdre.
Yeah. So again, Chair, just, I'll try to keep this as briefly as possible. Just echoing everything that Daljit said there. So many times in public forums, I've said thank you. I sometimes feel thank you just isn't enough, because when you see the depth and the breadth of the support which has been given, I'm talking about schools here clearly because it's family and children's services, it is quite a phenomenal amount of work which has gone on, and that's been done from a central team. So on a wider context, I was on a local government association call last week, and across the board, across all political parties, leaders from different councils around England, the one key thing is this has shown how fantastic local government can be and is. And I think that's a really key message, which might not sound very exciting to the public out there, but actually, if all of this stuff which has gone on in the council and with our partners had not happened, we would have been in a disaster scenario. So tiny little things like schools wanting to open, saying, but we just need something about how we can do some demarcation in the corridors. So what did we do? We got local services to give them some cones, some tape, tiny little things like that, which allowed a school to open, which allowed children from vulnerable families and key workers to send their kids so they can be involved in the fight against COVID. There's a tiny little example. But that with our central team here in at the county council, Kath, Dean, Sue Aberston, Daljit, crikey, I could sit here all day and name names. Everybody has been part of this collective effort to make a massive impact. And I would just also like to point out as well that at a time when some third-party organisations were furloughing staff and sending them home, we had our youth service operating, and they operated differently as the lockdown intensified, and they still engaged with our young people. Our children's social workers were still out there. They were still engaging with families. They were still supporting those families who needed that help. And, on a very practical level, there were some issues with the national free school meal system through a national company. And our team here were working at weekends and during the evening to support schools who were having problems logging onto a national voucher scheme. That's the kind of input, team effort, collective effort, which made a big, big impact. So again, thanking our trade unions. I've had discussions with trade unions. I've been involved with talking with them. Their emphasis has been around safety. I get it. Our head teachers, fantastic, can-do attitude. Everyone, from cooks, cleaners, head teachers, teaching assistants, you name it, everyone's stuck their two penneth in to actually make an impact. So that's the thank you bit. Just quickly running through, and I am sure you have read the report in terms of the support which has come from the children's services team here, but I just want to run through a couple of quick bullet points because I think it is really important to mention them. So in the first 10 weeks of lockdown, we had 52,000 pupil attendances on average during that really detailed lockdown, when it was only children of key workers and vulnerable children who were attending schools. 145 of our schools were open to support those families, and that was not a childminding service. That was a service to support people who were out there on the front line, supporting our NHS and supporting our communities to actually fight the COVID virus. We've also had online learning. 86% of our apprentices have been involved in some kind of significant learning. So again, about the continuity of stuff still been going on. We've also, and I think this is the key thing, is within the report, we've still got plans to, and we are following those plans. So COVID has slightly got in the way, and we've slightly had to do things differently, but the day job still continues. So in terms of this recovery, the key things that I want to draw out of this is we're taking forward the education challenge, which I know I've spoken about at some length. We've repurposed that. There's a submission going to government about how we support our schools post a COVID environment, when there will be issues around how we deal with that learning loss. We are actually helping schools to develop a recovery curriculum, which again is really important. The whole transition issue has been complex during the shutdown, but we're working with our schools, central teams and head teachers and governors working together to actually help in that transition recovery. We've also developed an education improvement board, because you know what, we get lots of really good news about how education's performing. I don't want that to stop, and I'm very conscious that this will have had an impact. So our education improvement board is absolutely going to be part of that recovery journey. Importantly, over the summer, we've introduced at least 28 pop-ups, which will be length and breadth of the county, working with children to support them, or, you know, for a very intense period of support over the summer period. We're also looking at special education needs provision, how we actually repurpose that and be more focused around some of the really important stuff around special education needs. We are continuing our children's home development, because, as you know, it's a real passion of mine, and I know you all feel the same. We do not want to be sending our children out of county to be educated and to be supported. If we can do that at home in our own county, we should do it. And the only way we're going to do that is by building more children's homes. We're also going to be setting up a school liaison service, which is looking at how we develop that link between employers and young people, because young people will be disproportionately impacted as a result of COVID, and we've got to make sure that they have the confidence to feel that we've got their back, and that we are working with employers, and also us as a council. We need to lead the way. We need to be showing that we can offer apprenticeships. And I do want to actually thank Gordon Stewart for this, because Gordon, about a little while back, took me out to meet Essity in Ponteland. They spoke about some of the issues, the blocks getting in the way of employers linking with apprenticeships. From that, we've developed this new program. So I do want to put on record a thanks to Gordon. And I would say that whatever his politics, he really did help frame and shape that. We're also very much involved in working with our young people to encourage apprenticeship routes as well. And with our partners in North of Tyne, as Daljit's indicated, not only have we had, I think, around £205,000 to support laptops and internet access for our students, but also we've got, I think, £500,000 to develop community hubs. And that money was put through, I think, about a week ago. And there is further work being done north of Tyne with our partners around how we support apprenticeships, how we absolutely add value to the work of supporting our young people post school education. And just very quickly as well, you'll know that a couple of weeks ago, the government announced a £1 billion fund to support education through the COVID crisis. Part of that funding was around how we could look at tuition, additional tuition for young people, and we are ready to go out to support and to bring in former teachers who can help access that fund to support our young people. In the same way that there was a shout out to NHS, former NHS staff, to come in, be part of that Nightingale project. We're ready and poised once that funding is actually through to be able to do that if we need to. And again, we are talking at great lengths with our schools. And if I can just touch on one thing, and this is really important, and this is a message that I need you all to get out, and hopefully this will get out from social media as well. Daljit touched on the multi-million-pound grant that we got from the government to support businesses, and that's gone out to a range of businesses, you know, from tourism through to stuff on industrial estates, and a wide range of businesses who've been supported. But in that, we've got nearly £500,000 to allocate to early years providers and to childminders. So an eligible early years provider could get up to £5,000, and a childminder, an eligible childminder, registered of course, could get up to £500. And it is really important that the message is got out there to our communities, to those registered childminders who are eligible, and details of the scheme can be found on the council website. It's under a little button called "What Support is Available for My Business?" And we will be promoting it on social media. But this is, again, another example of how we're understanding, particularly in terms of education, the issue of how we deal with childcare as more people return to work safely. And we've got to keep our NHS and other providers working, because they're the ones who effectively have saved us during this crisis. So there are so many things that I could touch on here, but those are just an overview, Chair, of the sort of things that we're focused on. We're continuing our school build, we're continuing investment in children's homes, we're continuing to work to improve education. This is a collective team effort, and precisely what Daljit says, if you think we can do something better, tell us, because actually we're all in this and we should all be learning from each other. So, Chair, that's probably pretty much what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Wayne and Daljit. I'll go straight over to Councillor Campbell, who's had her hand up for quite a while. If you could.
Sorry, it's just to say that the government nationally may have gotten some things wrong, but certainly there's one thing they could learn from Northumberland. I think Northumberland could teach them a lesson in how things are done, and done in such a wonderful way. And it's because of the team that we have in Northumberland. You know, Daljit and her team, I think we should look at having a plaque erected somewhere to thank them, both them and the health service, for what they have done in this terrible time, because words cannot thank them enough. The number of people who tell me on a daily basis, you know, how wonderful they've done things in Northumberland. You know, they've kept the lion from the door on a lot of people, and particularly in their businesses, and how quickly that money was delivered into people's bank accounts. They were quite shocked by the fact that it was, you know, asked for one day and it was in the bank account the next day. I mean, the 1,000 workers, the 1,000 volunteers, it shows you, you know, how the people in Northumberland want to come together and help. And help is the main thing. It's the one thing that's come out of this, is how kind people have been to each other. And it's brought out the best in people. And that's wonderful to see. And we hope that that lasts, that we don't lose that momentum when all of this is finished. But, you know, I cannot thank, from the road sweepers up over, you know, the work which they've done. And the council, you know, I've got to give credit where it's due. The council has done everything. I can't fault what they've done in this pandemic. You know, our party's not in charge, but the people who are in charge have done a brilliant job. And I want to say a thank you, especially from me, to everybody, for all of their time and effort. And the staff have just been amazing. Whenever I would ring up, I always got a call back immediately, however busy people were. And that's worth remembering, that and other things weren't put on hold in the midst of this. I hope that, you know, the recovery plan will work for everybody. That's the most important thing going forward now, is the recovery plan, because there's a massive job to be done out there. When you turn the television on in the mornings, you know, you want to turn it off, because the news seems so dreadful. But I've got faith in Northumberland, and I think with the leadership we've got, I think, you know, we don't have to worry. And that may sound strange coming from me, but I feel I have to say that at this moment in time. I might be saying something different next year, but at this moment in time, I always believe in giving credit where it's due. And thank you to everybody.
Thank you, Deirdre, for those kind comments. I'm sure Wayne will be very pleased. If I can move on to Councillor Dickinson. I can't see you on the screen, Scott. I don't know if you've got your camera.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, this device doesn't have a camera, so I haven't got one. Some may say that's a blessing. But anyway, thanks very much for that report, Daljit. I just want to place on record from me, really, because I haven't had the opportunity till this point, really, to thank yourselves and the officers for the way that you've conducted yourselves in this pandemic, not only from an operational and clear safety point of view for staff and residents of Northumberland, but equally from an information sharing point of view. I think the briefings have been outstanding. The information we've been able to provide to parish councils and others from those types of briefings have been fantastic. The time that's been taken to communicate with the opposition leaders to keep us informed of what was happening. And that's right across the executive team. They've all been absolutely marvellous. Equally, I'd like to place a record my thanks to Wayne, because Wayne's kept us in the loop as well. And actually, you know, at the start of this, bothered to communicate with every single member about what was going on. And I know our members really appreciated that, as do I. So if they haven't thanked him individually, I'm thanking them on their behalf. There was a number of concerns during this from a national point of view, where councils potentially weren't being communicated with, and guidance came out really late. And I think the other thing around that was that the council itself and the executive team clearly responded the Northumberland way and had something ready to go regardless of what came out from national government. And I do think, from a personal point of view, care homes, the learning disability homes in my patch really, really valued the work of the social care team, who the council supported with PPE, and as private organisations that didn't necessarily need to do that. And we've seen in other areas of the country where that wasn't actually done, and the consequences and issues that then raised. I think from our point of view as a council, obviously that's going to have a financial impact. It's going to have a lot of things that we then need to deal with in the recovery. But as a team, you know, cross-political purposes, this recovery plan for the residents of Northumberland, for the council, for everybody, really needs to be on the top of everyone's agenda to work together and make sure Northumberland continues to fare well in this pandemic, which is still rife. And, you know, we can't underestimate the challenges that we still face as communities, and those who are most vulnerable will experience in coming weeks and months, and indeed second peaks and all this kind of stuff. So I think it's just really from a point of view of thanks. I mean, the only issue, if I have to put something in there, because I can't, you know, leave it on the mark like that. I do have issue with the speed in which we attempted to open some of the public lavatories and things, which kind of drew people to the area. Some of the larger things like country parks, when they reopened, I found out on social media rather than being contacted. And I just think there was just a little bit of a disconnect with one particular department. But I think on the main, the rest of the council performed extremely well. And it's been a pleasure to help wherever possible. And indeed, community hubs across the communities that I know from third sector point of view have really appreciated the support they've had to offer as well. So I look forward to working with everybody on the recovery plan, and thanks very much from the Labour group.
Councillor Renner Thompson, could I just come in there? Because I'd just like to thank Councillor Campbell and Councillor Dickinson for their comments. And I was a little bit amused by the plaque. But I think from my perspective, but it's a very serious point. So for me, it's about those frontline staff, whether they're teachers, they work on the roads, whether they're going into people's houses, you know, as an executive team and managers. You know, we have been at work and we've been working long hours, but the risks people faced in terms of either being in an office or at home versus actually out there mid-pandemic, you know, having to wear PPE, having to worry about themselves and their families and their, you know, not seeing their parents, etc. So my concern absolutely is about those frontline staff, you know, cleaners in schools, cleaners in our buildings, cleaners for public toilets. I'll be totally honest with you, I've been very clear, as has the executive team, about a very timely risk-assessed way. Now, you know, we haven't been in this situation before, and certainly looking back, which we do every week through our Gold Command team, there are things we would do differently and just take maybe a little bit more time on. You know, we all learn from experience. But what I would say is that on a sort of nicer front, one of the things we are working on as a team is how we can reward staff, particularly those frontline staff who've been out there in the midst of it. You know, people say, well, is that a financial reward? You know, not everybody's there for that financial reward, but it would be nice to be able to do some of that. alongside that, one of the things I have been thinking about is some sort of, I mean, this probably sounds a bit mad, but a bit of an art display of photographs from periods in time, because, you know, whether it's staff taking food parcels to people's houses or just calling them from a phone to say, not just, but calling them, and that's the only person they hear from week to week, or you know, our refuse collectors collecting the bins and having a chat with the people. You know, some people come out because that's the only person they might see. So we've got some really good photographs and just sort of snapshots, and we'll look to actually get something pulled together to just to say thank you to some of those frontline staff, you know, whether they're schools or whether they're voluntary sector, etc., because alongside some sort of reward for the frontline staff, because I do think that's important, saying thank you to people, and we really appreciate that. I know the teams really appreciate it, and we do regularly write to them, give them a ring, contact them, send them little gifts, because actually it's those little things that matter at a time like this, but they're the people who've kept us safe. You know, it's the same thing in the NHS. I work partly for the NHS. You know, people have gone up over and beyond, and I think, I know in Northumberland, our public services have always been loved and really appreciated, but actually it's times like this where you know the value of them. Thank you.
Thank you, Daljit. Councillor Daly, you indicated there, and then we'll go to Councillor Stewart.
Very briefly, Chair, it proves that people genuinely are watching this on YouTube, because I apparently said inadvertently that Essity was in Ponteland. It's not. Everybody knows it's in Prudhoe, which is second best place on the planet, apart from Cram. People are obviously watching because I've had a text. There we go.
And Gordon, was that the point you were going to make?
It was at the start, but I will echo the comments made by everybody here today, and thank you for coming to Prudhoe on more than one occasion. It's a great town that's moving strides forward. You did mention there before, Wayne, about the youth service, and I think particularly thanks to those that have been underrated. It's a service which we relish in all areas, including Prudhoe, and I've had discussions there in the last year or so about what's happening in the summer months. Pop-ups as well. Likely the Prudhoe is going to get one of those, and it's throughout the county. It's something really important thing. And also, don't forget Sure Start. I had a discussion with Sure Start and Prudhoe a couple of days ago. Fantastic work, and they're working throughout the summer. The question for you, because it is scrutiny, is how well are we doing compared to other local authorities in the region and nationally? In particular, I draw your attention to page 21 and the schools and other providers. Get the kids back there. And also, you're composing your answer there, Wayne. I've been speaking to staff, head teachers, parents, and actually children. And it was upsetting to an extent to see a 6-year-old girl I spoke to who said she was really anxious to come back to school, which she loved so much. But the positive thing about it is she came out of there the next day after being off for weeks, and she absolutely loved it there. So great work done by everybody, all parties in that. Praise for all, absolutely right. What are we doing? Where are we in the league table, regionally and nationally? And I don't know which way you're going to go for this, but are we good or bad? Can you explain why? The last point is, you have been generous offering Deirdre a drink there. Can I just say that Prudhoe has some of the finest licensed premises anywhere in the county? Thank you, Mr.
Right. I want me to come in there. Dean can come in on if I get something wrong here. So, just on the subject of licensed premises, anybody who knows me knows I don't drink, so it's a coffee. Right. So, in terms of what I think your question there, which was in terms of the number of schools that we have operating and how we compare nationally. So, the national average of students, pupils back at school, I think at the moment is 16%. Northumberland is, the latest figures that I saw was 20%. So in terms of the numbers of children physically in school, we're above the national average. But, you know, and I don't want to set alarm bells ringing, because you could look at that, well, 80% aren't. Don't forget that gradually schools have been encouraged to take more pupils in, so that's probably one of the reasons why we are higher than the England average. During this time as well, we've also had some really good online learning offers, either through the individual schools themselves or through educationnorthumberland.co.uk and all these other Padlets that we operate through the central team here in Northumberland. So there's lots of things which have gone on to support those young people who've not, until the extra number of pupils could attend, been able to get to school. And obviously we are, and this is another thing, our staff are going to be in during the summer. There's no summer break here. They're going to be working because we've got to help support our schools be ready where possible and where safe to take in the additional students, which is the national directive to try to get our schools back safely and securely from September. So yeah, so we are above the national average in terms of the number of pupils in school. And Dean, I'm sure will come in to correct me if I've got those wrong, but I think nationally it's 16%. Northumberland is at 20%.
Wayne, if it's okay, I will jump in. It's actually about 22% now. It's a big 2% though.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
well, that's
Learned
2%.
something new today. There we are.
That's still a lot of children on the ground. Julie Parkin has a question.
Hi, good afternoon, colleagues. I think it is afternoon now. I have a couple of questions to direct to Councillor Daly, please, if I could, and it's going back to the comments that he made on additional tuition and the funding for that. And my questions are, how will the council identify where that additional tuition is needed? Is there a plan of action for that? And also what the recruitment process will be to bring in the former teachers that you mentioned to fulfil that tuition.
Okay, this again, this goes back to that £1 billion fund, and from memory, I think there was something like 250, 300 million pounds, which was identified for catch-up tuition. So officers will be looking at that, and perhaps Dean can dive in more on the operational level. But if it is required that we need to go out to get additional support, because with the best will in the world, Julie, we can't have teachers who are working full-time in schools also expected to work evenings and weekends and, you know, whatever else, because it actually would not be sensible in terms of burnout.
I'm in total agreement with that.
Yeah, so I just want to assure you, we're not expecting teachers to work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It just doesn't happen. So I just think in terms of the operational element of it, when we get the granular detail of that funding and how it's going to work, we will be ready, if need be, and if required, to put an appeal out to get that tuition support. And I'm guessing that the detail of that will be school-led, because throughout this whole pandemic and from the 23rd of March, when the directive was to close schools for all but vulnerable and key workers, it has been schools that have led that work. Head teachers, governors, individual teachers, care staff, the support staff, they're the ones who've put the hard work in with the support of our team. But Dean or Kath may want to come in on a more technical level on the response I've given there.
Yeah, it's Dean. There's very little guidance at the moment, Julie, as you're probably aware.
Yeah.
What we're hearing so far is the proportion of that £1 billion that will go to schools will be on an all pupils basis, i.e. your pupil population. So it will be on a per pupil funding, which we welcome actually, so that all schools will get a share of it. Our understanding about the other portion of it the initial announcement said it would go to, quote, something like major tuition firms. So we need to keep an eye on that one as to make sure. Now, there are one or two companies that we work with locally, but they are only one or two. So we just need to be very aware of that. And the third thing I know so far, with no other details in front of me, is that a number of our schools have already started looking at this from September. And as Wayne says, trying to recruit recently retired teachers, graduates who are sort of BEd students who are out of work at the moment, haven't got a placement for September. But as soon as we know more detail, and I really know no more than the original announcement, unless I've missed something, that seems to be all that's been said so far about it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Dean. Okay, does anyone else have any questions for Councillor Wallace?
Thank you, guys. Can I start by just agreeing with what Scott and Deirdre have said about the response the county council was made? I think full credit must be given there. To follow up on Dean's point there, a lot of money is coming into the county, but a lot of our vulnerable families see the school as the one trusted service. Is there some kind of system in place where schools can easily access funding to help them support specific families who are in trouble?
Can anyone answer that, Dean?
Not that I'm aware of, and I think that was the point I was making, Russ. It's going to be on a per pupil funding as opposed to sort of needs or means tested in some way. So that's not my understanding. I mean, you've obviously got the pupil premium, and we're hoping that is secure for for the financial year. It does seem to become part of the finance plan. In terms of actually targeted, the answer is I'm not aware of any additional funding over and above the tuition funding and pupil premium that's being targeted specifically for education purposes and for catch-up education purposes. Is that what you were asking me, Russ? I'm sorry.
It's really about vulnerable families who only trust the school as being the one official thing they will trust. If they identify families who have really suffered and children who have suffered through the period, how do they access funding to support the families in that situation?
I'm not aware, but I can see Dalgis, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, Councillor. Sorry for butting in there, Dean. I think on a more, what we've tried to ensure, and this is actually one of the recovery issues about how we take things forward, we've got a piece of work ongoing which is about communities and people living in their communities, rather than just because we are conveniently structured, adults, children's, local services, revs and bends, finance. That's not how the world works. So for us, it's been really important to take the lessons from what we've learned, particularly in these last few weeks. And one of the really critical pieces of work we're doing is a connection between children's families, adult services and wider services, including schools within that, because there is no reason why our linkages with schools won't strengthen. And it doesn't always come back to money, but sometimes it does. It's about the support around particular families, and sometimes they're more vulnerable than others. So good examples are where either through North of Town or through government funding, we've been provided with IT equipment and additional equipment for families and particularly more vulnerable children, support with of the free school meals. You know, there are arrangements in place through the communities together for families to approach to get more support, particularly, I mean, one of the big things for me is around employment and future availability of employment across the county. And we're doing a specific piece of work to ensure that, you know, obviously we've had levels of unemployment, but if those, which probably they will unfortunately increase now, that we're ready with a safety net around skills, training, etc. So it's not, and I'm not in any way saying Councillor Wallace was saying this, but for us it's not one individual place. And I know schools are a trusted place for families, but actually the communities together work has really demonstrated from a public health and a community basis, people are very willing to link up and support each other. And they just sometimes need a little bit of seed corn money, or the access to food or supplies, or different, you know, not necessarily as in food and resources, but just different things and facilitate, you know, sports equipment. The communities team have been out with their bus. I sent a note to all members about that. Obviously, we didn't want to really highlight that publicly, but we've had teams out in their buses with groups of staff engaging young people and families. So there's many ways that we've done that on a corporate basis.
I accept that, Daljeet, yeah.
Thank you both. Graham, are you wanting to say something?
It's great, right, in terms of social care. There is also multi-agency working groups being put together to try and support children and families where the children might be anxious coming back to school. And there's a range of resources and supports being put over the summer term and going into the autumn term to try and make sure that we support children and families children to get back into school, particularly where they are anxious about doing that for exactly the reasons to get the support they need.
Thank you, Graham.
Could I just come in with one other point, if that's all right? Because again, it's kind of based on what Russ was saying about schools being trusted, and actually the support that they provide, particularly for some very vulnerable and challenging young people. So members may or may not be aware that we have a dedicated service which supports children with sensory issues. They may have speech and language difficulties. They could actually have autism. Previously, that's been a charged service to schools. It's now free of charge. So, you know, that's a real, and that's been very welcomed by schools. So again, that's another example of how, you know, in terms of that wraparound support, we're identifying like a laser beam some of our very vulnerable students and how we can support schools to be able to help them. So that's a really good piece of news that people need to be aware around that new service, which is available, normally charged to schools, which now we've been able to support in-house.
Thank you, Wayne. Mark?
Thanks, Chair. It's just to bring up, you know, that there is such a huge amount of hard work that's gone on by the officers, but by all of those in the schools themselves, with regards to the children that have been returning already for key workers, etc., and that will be returning later in the year. The amount of health and safety work that has gone on in these schools. Only yesterday, my wife and I received a communication from one of the schools for our children, and it's a line by line description of every single thing which has been put in place to allow, you know, one of our children to go back in September, and it's for every year, different start times, what every class will do for their own bubble, etc. All of this detail, because, you know, there's so many children, you know, we've seen it on social media, talking to them ourselves, who want to return to see their friends, to get back to a routine, to get back to normality. You know, teenagers as well, they want structure. This is what children are saying themselves. But as Councillor Stewart said, you know, he's already spoke to someone about this apprehension. What doesn't help is the amount of negativity and sometimes scaremongering with messages and media, when what they could be doing is giving a bit more education in these messages and media, and being a bit more informative around it. We know that, you know, this is a bit of a scary time, but there could be more informative and educational messages come out of what's being shared around, and take away some of this apprehension, as Councillor Stewart, you know, mentioned before, and make it a bit better time for children getting back to school.
Thank you, Mark. I think the council's doing a good job at putting those messages out. I don't know if any of the officers want to comment.
No, I think definitely from the council, yes. And I'm not, you know, on about from the council side. I'm just on on other messages that are coming from elsewhere.
Okay, thank you very much. No one else has indicated to speak. I think we've gone through that quite comprehensively. Thank you very much for Daljit coming to speak to us. This will no doubt be not be the last time that COVID is talked about at the Education Scrutiny Committee, because we've still got summer to get through, which will be a very interesting time for schools. And well, the next couple of years could be a very interesting time for schools. We'll just have to wait and see how it goes. So unless we have any further final comments, I can let Daljit go.
Thank you. Nice to see you.
Thank you. Okay, so that really concludes the meeting. There is one thing at the start of the meeting, I forgot to sign off the minutes of the previous meeting, which was a very straightforward meeting we had about Woodburn School. Has anyone got any comments about that? You're happy that I signed them off as a true record? Yes, no, good. Okay. Our next meeting is Kay. Do you have a date for the next meeting?
Sorry, Chair.
Sorry, Chris.
That's all right. The next meeting is scheduled for September. We'll be having a chairman's group to discuss the things that have come out, the other scrutinies in relation to COVID. And if there's anything that needs to come to facts, it might be that we have to schedule another meeting. But at the moment, it's scheduled for September.
That's fine. Wayne?
Yeah, Chair. So that very helpfully confirms something that I was going to say, which is Dean still on the line?
Yeah, he's there. He's a big red.
Right. So this is the embarrassing time, because this, now we've had it confirmed there from Chris, this will be Dean's last Family and Children's Services Overview and Scrutiny Committee. And I just thought it was worthy of recognition, to put on record. Oh, he's left the meeting. He's obviously come back. Can see that. Is to put on record our gratitude and thanks to Dean for, he's rejoined. To put on record our gratitude and thanks to Dean for everything he's done in the sort of 2.5 years that he's been. And this is the second time that he's been in Northumberland. He was with us a few years back, and he came back in the substantive post of Director of Education about 2.5 years ago. And I just thought, and I'm sure you'll all kind of echo what I want to say, which is a massive thank you to him. Probably, I've got some bullet points I just want to run through, but probably one of the biggest things is a massive improvement in terms of the support and communication that we have with all of our schools up and down the county. And that was one of the missions that Dean came in to achieve when he came to us a couple of years back. And so if I can just run through some very quickly, what's he done, what's he achieved? We've got the highest progress 8 in the Northeast in 2019. We've got the second highest attainment 8 in the Northeast in 2018. Our second-year-old provision, we're in the top 2 nationally. Dean discussed that earlier. Our early years outcome are above national average. All of our key stage 1 outcomes are above national average. A higher proportion of Northumberland pupils are school ready than the national average. Phonics outcomes remain above the national average. Key stage 1 outcomes have been above the national average. Outcomes at key stage 2 have been in line or above the national average over the past couple of years. And Northumberland has remained first in the region for the good level of development foundation stage. And, I could sit here and genuinely, Chair, I could read out this list of things that have happened in the last couple of years, and I'm sure Dean won't claim all the credit, because this is teamwork. It's down to teachers, teaching assistants, head teachers, the central team here. But Dean has been absolutely pivotal in getting that recalibration of how we work with our schools and how we engage with our schools. And I think it is really, really important to recognize that he has made a difference. And at the end of the day, in any job you do, you actually want to make a difference, and he's made a difference. So I know he's going on to some new challenges. He's got I'm sure he'll be doing lots of traveling when he's allowed back on a plane, and he's got lots of things that he wants to do in a kind of a new chapter of his life. But I do, want, as I've said, to put on record on a personal level, and I'm sure on behalf of everyone else, the council, the administration, a massive thank you to Dean. He has made a difference. And as I say, if that's what you achieve in life, you've done something. So that was it, Chair.
Thank you, Wayne. I'm sure all of us in the Facts family agree with that. We've watched the progress from day one, and it's we're always happy with the way that it's gone so far. Okay, members and officers, thank you very much for attending. Your paperwork for the next meeting will be in the post, and see you next time. Thank you.